joining us now. NBC News correspondent Vaughn Hilliard, MSNBC legal correspondent Lisa Ruman, and criminal defense attorney and former federal prosecutor Duncan Levin. Lisa, probation officer, that interview, what's it like? Has it happened yet?
We don't know exactly, Katie, what time it would have happened today or if it's happened already. However, there are two things about it that are unusual. The first is that it's occurring electronically, although that's certainly permitted under New York City law and regulations. The second is that Todd Blanche is going to be at his client's side and had to get Judge Merchan's permission in order to make that happen. You might ask, why do you need your lawyer next to you? And I'm going to tell you why. Because the probation department's guidelines for conducting that interview include eliciting from the defendant a statement about their alleged crime, now a crime that has led to a jury verdict. If you're Todd Blanche and your client has 3 additional criminal cases against him, as well as the sentencing coming up, you're going to want to make sure that that statement, if he makes one at all, is as buttoned up and circumscribed as it can be.
Because it can be used against you in other cases?
Well, it certainly could be used against you in this situation. And remember, this is a person who might want the world to see what's in this probation report, even if parts of it are antithetical to his best interest. He may put that out into the public domain to show that this is, again, lawfare against him by Democrats, weaponized against him.
But this is standard, Duncan. This is what everyone goes through when they've been convicted of a felony.
This is standard, but I think the world is starting to see there's not exactly a lot of standards in the New York City court systems. Cases are different and they're done differently. In the federal system, which a lot of practitioners are maybe more used to, there's a probation report that's made. The lawyers are routinely there as part of the probation interview. Here, that's not the case. And Judge Merchan had to specifically give an order to Todd Blanche to allow him in there. So there have been cases where there is no probation interview, where the judge just goes directly to sentence. There are cases where there are no sentencing reports done and the judge just imposes sentence. And so things are a little bit different in state court. In this case in particular, because it's so high profile, everything's being done by the book. And so this is just an exception to the rule.
Let's talk about the other big thing that's happening, and that's January 6th and all the fallout that still remains. There's not going to be a trial anytime soon, it looks like. So let's talk about what Donald Trump's been saying on the campaign trail. I just played it a moment ago, calling the January 6th violent convicts warriors. Why would he use a term like warriors?
I don't know why he would, but he did. And it was there at that rally in Las Vegas when he did that. And of course, my ears perked up because there is a certain level of valor that is established on an individual when you are designating them to be warriors. Warriors in the connotation is somebody who is going and fighting on behalf of a cause, a potentially good cause. And we know that the January 6 attackers were not fighting on behalf of a good cause. And yet Donald Trump has held up these individuals who he has called patriots in the past. He yesterday praised them and said that they have been treated horribly. The January 6 defendants, there was one individual who was just released from prison a couple months ago who was there in that crowd. This, for Donald Trump, is a part of casting a sort of sympathetic light on these individuals and what they were doing, because if he is going to take the position that the election was stolen, he is going to go and defend those who were going and trying to keep it from ultimately putting Joe Biden in the White House.
Do we know what he plans on doing with those convictions if he's reelected?
He has repeatedly dangled the prospect of pardoning them. He did so again yesterday. He has pledged to do that as one of his first 3 acts on day one, to pardon the January 6 defendants. Of course, when you get into the nitty-gritty of the exact acts of them, he has deflected, but we should take him at his word and the suggestions that he's repeatedly made.
What sort of convictions are these?
They're convictions for obstruction of an official proceeding in many cases. There are also convictions for essentially like breaking and entering with respect to government property. So they run the gamut, Katie.
But there are also some for violently beating up police officers.
Right. So there are some that are for the statute called 1512, which is actually currently being held by the United States, heard by the United States Supreme Court. They're deciding whether this section 1512 appropriately extends to some of the conduct by the people who broke into the Congress. But there are people out there who have been charged with assault and with breaking and entering, basically trespassing.
But he also says he's for law and order and he's for police officers. How does that line up with saying that these convicts, these violent offenders, are warriors? I mean, they're on camera, some of them just truly going after and bloodying up police officers.
There is a fantasy about what played out on that day that I keep coming back to. I was among the crowd there before they went into that rally yesterday, and I was asking one gentleman about the fact that Capitol Police officers were brutally beaten. And he said and told me that they were welcomed in. And again, this goes in. There were the instigators that they claimed that came were FBI informants, which of course is not reality. And I know that we roll our eyes at this, but I cannot tell you that man who I was interviewing turned to the crowd and said, this guy thinks that January 6th was bad, right? And everybody booed at me. And they believe that the individuals who were the ones attacking were not actually the ones who we know because they have pled guilty to the charges. And despite that, there is sort of, I don't mean to obfuscate here, Katie, but it doesn't have to make sense. But that's what we're living
when we're talking
through right
about
now.
not making sense, Donald Trump, and I saw this in 2016, I know you've been seeing it, just enjoys this level of support that defies gravity. I mean, no matter what he does, he says he could shoot somebody on Fifth Avenue. I think now all of us would hold our breath and think, God, who could he really get away with that? And have that be an honest question. Like, we don't actually... In the normal gravity-involved world, no, of course you couldn't get away with that. But in this world, maybe Donald Trump could get away with that. You talk to voters at his Nevada rally. What do they think of Donald Trump, the man today who's now been convicted of a felony by a jury?
I think to that point, let's be very clear. Donald Trump repeats himself a lot, right? And I've said that he repeated every single time he walked out of that courtroom over the course of 7 weeks, he repeated the same lines, attacking the judge's daughter, attacking Matthew Colangelo, the number 3 on the DA's team, as being sent over from the Department of Justice. He repeats himself over and over, and that penetrates the dialogue on right-wing media, which frankly millions of people are taking in. And so they're not, when I suggest that, you know, he was just found convicted by 12 New Yorkers. Well, it's like, okay, well, number one, they're New Yorkers. Of course, they were going to find him guilty. And number two, that he never had the chance to win this case because of the power of the district attorney's office being directed by the Biden DOJ. And I say that because Donald Trump has repeated this and conditioned his supporters to know how to deflect. So when I say felony conviction, there were multiple people there that were proudly wearing shirts and saying, I'm going to vote for a felon.
They have the talking points already down.
They have the talking points down, and they know how to defend the man that is running for president of the United States. And you could very well assume that those deflection points or those comebacks are exactly what they are using inside of their churches, their kids' schools.
Let's listen to some of what you gathered. Sorry to cut you off.
I think he should obey the law, well, no matter what happens. And I think he would obey the law. If he's being forced to go to prison, then he'll go to prison and he'll serve his time. And we will vote him into office despite that.
That voter Gilbert is saying there, and I think that his voice is important because they believe that the system is working against them. But they believe that the MAGA movement is so strong that they're going to be able to beat the rigged system against them. And that's why Donald Trump's line is too big to rig. That is the line that they said it from the campaign exchange in Arizona and Nevada, is that if we turn out the MAGA masses, we will beat them despite the fraud.
So one of the things that I think is worrying for this coming election, much in the same way it was worrying ahead of the 2020 election, Donald Trump kept going out there and saying the only way that I could lose is if it was rigged. And his supporters believe that. It's rigged if he loses. That's him saying democracy was stolen from you, convincing them that democracy was stolen from them. And what are they going to do? If they really believe democracy is being stolen from them, they're going to take up arms. They said they would do that. They did that. So this is another version of what we saw in 2020. I mean, I don't know if you know how prepared the federal government is, but is this the sort of thing that should be taken seriously from a prosecutorial standpoint?
Well, what the other part of it, not to be missed, in addition to taking up arms, is that they're really starting to take up this notion of lawfare, because you've seen this, and even in the last few days, congressional Republicans trying to push a bill that would remove all state criminal prosecutions to federal court for a president or a former president. And besides being very likely unconstitutional, that would actually take out of the hands of local DAs exactly what you just said, shooting someone in the middle of Fifth Avenue, a purely local crime. No nexus to any federal question, crossing state lines. That would be unavailable to be prosecuted by a local DA and brought. So you're seeing the politicization of the criminal justice system in a way that is really worrisome. On both sides, everyone's accusing everyone of taking politics and letting it creep into the system.
I'm glad that